All right, welcome to the Consistently Performance Podcast, helping you improve your performance and your well-being. I'm Dr. Cassidy Preston. Today we had a great guest with Liam Heelis. He's a former OHL player, was drafted, played at Acadia, and then went and played pro hockey, and now is the head coach of McGill University's men's hockey team. So he's got some great lessons on the one side of like his mental skills that he used to work his way up the ladder, and then now also his coaching philosophy and some great research he's done, and great insights on what it takes to really build a culture and a championship culture where you're really able to work with the players in this new style of coaching. So hope you enjoy. As always, we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Campoli trying to clear it. Burrow shoots, scores!
All right. Thanks for joining, Liam. Just to dive right in, why don't you just tell us a bit of your story, starting from minor hockey, playing junior, going overseas for a little bit, and then now coming back and being a head coach at McGill. So you've got quite the journey. We'd love to hear. We'll dive into a few parts, but maybe just give us the summary off the bat.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Cassidy. Started off in minor hockey for me, growing up in Georgetown, Ontario, really enjoying like backyard rink hockey and playing outdoors. And going into my draft year, I moved from our Halton Hurricane minor hockey system to the Mississauga Senators, and was fortunate enough to be drafted late in the Ontario Hockey League draft there in the 10th round to the Peterborough Petes. At that time, I moved into junior hockey, Tier 2 as a 16-year-old, played for the Mississauga Chargers, close enough local team, and it was a good opportunity for me there to be able to play as a young forward in Tier 2 junior hockey over going to another program that might have been a better championship team, but me maybe developing less on the ice. And that was a big year for me personally in terms of my development. And that following year, I was at the end of that season, actually, I was asked to be a call-up with the Petes. I went there over the course of the March break, got my first game in as a Peterborough Pete, and played the following 3 seasons there as well. I was kind of a turnstile coaching-wise in those 3 seasons, and we didn't have a lot of success on the ice, but we did have a great group, and they were formative years for me too. Lived with a great billet family, so I had a great life away from the rink as well, and still relationships that I cherished there. After that, I moved on in my overage hockey season to the Owen Sound Attack. There we had a lot of success. It was a great season. We were sort of a Cinderella story or an underdog team there with Owen Sound. They hadn't projected us to make the playoffs at the start of the season. We came really hot out of the gates, I think 10-1, and ended up leading our conference there in the Western Conference in the Ontario Hockey League going into playoffs, and had a big playoff that resulted in a Game 7 overtime win over Mississauga. And that was a really special time and a lot of fun. From there, moving forward, I had some good conversations with my general manager and head coach, actually, and a number of other stakeholders, I guess, invested in my life personally about what the next pathway was going to be for me between pro hockey and university. Ultimately, I decided to utilize my school package and go to university like you did yourself. And I did an undergrad in psych at Acadia University. I chose Acadia looking for sort of a small town feel and a strong community vibe, similar to the town I grew up in. And that's kind of what I was looking for experience-wise at that time. And it fit really well into my hockey career. And I just tried to continue to develop from there. And we had some success on the ice, going to 2 national championships and winning a league championship there. And it also culminated in some personal success for me, getting my first NHL tryout as a third-year university student. So it was, I guess people would consider that a late bloomer, but at the same time, it's just, I guess, persistency too. And it was really neat to get that experience. After that, I knew I really wanted to pursue coaching too, I guess, in my first 4 years of university. And the next step was wanting to learn more from an education standpoint. And I applied to McGill University and got into their sports psych program there with Dr. Gordon Bloom. And in that time, we talked about coaching and coaching philosophy, and also dove pretty deep into a research study with major junior hockey coaches and trying to learn how they manage difficult or the most difficult athletes that they've coached and come across in their time without kind of deterring their team culture. So I think I learned a lot in a short amount of time, and we all know a guy that we've played with for sure that would probably fit in that difficult athlete category, playing major junior hockey. And it was a 2-year degree. I only had 5 years of school eligibility like everyone else. And so in my 6th year, I hopped on the coaching staff as a video coach. I was essentially a volunteer, but really got to learn how to code and do some analytics stuff and dive right into the coach's office as well before heading overseas. So I finished my degree and I wanted to play another couple years actually. And my intention was to pursue a PhD like yourself and do that while playing major professional hockey. And I had signed on to do that, and McGill came calling back and had offered me a full-time assistant coaching position. And really at that time, I felt that was the best next step for my career and my life, in transitioning away from the playing to moving behind the bench and learning that side of things in a more in-depth and detailed manner from an experience standpoint now that I had the education. And since that time, I've managed to get where I am today with the McGill men's hockey team, and now I'm working as the head coach here through the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, and lots we could dive into on that side. And we'll definitely, I want to touch a lot on even just your research on the coaching and dealing with difficult players as well as your coaching philosophy. But I'd like to just, backpedal on a couple of just your playing career, and obviously a really interesting journey. Like you said, kind of a late bloomer, but not necessarily, just persistence and, working your way pretty steadily up there and putting in the work. I'd like to maybe most importantly talk about the importance of the mental game for you. So like what, because obviously you studied psych and you're really interested in sports psychology. We've had other chats. What were some of the big lessons for you on your mental game, and what helped, and what things did you struggle with at times during that journey from, starting in minor hockey, the draft year, hitting junior, like there's a lot goes on in those few years. And then even transitioning through university into pro hockey as well. What were some big takeaways for you? And we can dive on a few of those.
Yeah, great question. I think the mental skills thing was really what made the difference for me as a player. I don't think I had any special talents or I was the fastest or the best shooter, but the mental side and consistency was something that I worked at actively from a very young age. And I know it is something that we've talked about before in previous conversations. And I'd speak with my dad between games and after them. And we were trying to work through strategies that would help with my consistency and confidence and overall performance, I guess, if that's what we're really looking at. And he had me start working through just visualizing myself, scoring goals and finishing chances and opportunities, because you notice over the course of a season how many chances you have and how many maybe you've missed because you weren't focused or really engaged in the present in that moment. So one of the other really big things for me at a young age was just sort of having trigger words that engaged me into the present. And I would repeat the word, like the words focus in the back of my mind. And I know it's maybe a trivial word even, because from a sports psych perspective now, you think maybe that one's not the right one, but for me it worked really well.
Yeah.
And then there were a couple others. My reset button, like breathe when I wanted to try, and I think I was an emotional player, like I said, and
Mm-hmm.
I really tried to overcome those emotions and become a more leveled person out there on the ice, for not only for my own success, but for my teammates and for my coaches to trust me too. So working through that. And then when I became more of a role player in Peterborough, those transitioned into just do your job. So I was out there chipping pucks, finishing checks, forechecking. I think the visualization, taking time before a hockey game in your own personal space where you can find your breathing and just think about the potential circumstances and situations you're going to be in a game, whether you're a penalty killer. For me, it was early on as a penalty killer, working through my penalty killing routes and even strength forechecks and jobs off face-offs, so that I was prepared when that game came, to transitioning more to a power play guy and understanding my routes there and feeling confident and visualizing, what's going to happen when and where, and working through those mental maps before a game were more successful for me in later years in university. So I would say that I've used quite a few, and I think a lot of guys too. You see in the NHL, they put stuff on their sticks, and I'd put the acronyms for stay focused, like SF on my stick, and don't worry, DW, and do your job, DYJ, do your job. Yeah. On my stick at times too, when I felt like I really needed it.
Yeah, no, those are all awesome and great examples of the how to, to clear your mind and to get focused is, can subtle cues and reminders, reset kind of concept. Definitely visualization is a big one. I know, I'd love to get, maybe just repeat. I know you shared it with me before, like you would like go through all 7 different options or on the half wall, right? Like if this happens, then I do this, and this is what I feel like. And you're running through that. Like, so it's just like rehearsal. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that one, because that was, I know, and like you said, it really helped later in your career when you were doing that. So
yeah, sure. So walking through those steps on a half wall on the power play, for instance, it was like right away before a puck even gets to you, the defenseman's going to walk the line. You've got to get your feet. It was me practicing and visualizing my feet coming up to the blue line and then facing the net before getting that puck with my stick on the ice. Mm-hmm. And then once receiving that puck, you've taken a look visualization wise, you see that the defender's coming or not from the penalty kill at the top. So they're PK forward. If he's coming hard with speed, okay, your first 2 strides are going to be 2 crossovers towards the boards while coming downhill, they would call it, from a coaching perspective, towards the net. If I have some time and I've read that I've had time, I'm going to take my first 2 steps into the middle of the ice.
Yeah.
And my next step there in that visualization process is, okay, if he's coming, I'm working through that and I'm looking through the seam. If the seam's an option and their second penalty killing forward isn't there, I can make that pass across the seam. Yeah. If that's not there, I continue skating downhill. The next option we know is that my pop out player is going to pop out right into an open area. I have to focus on where that defender's stick is and try and make a crisp pass. That's not there. I continue skating and I'm looking for a shot or a pass to the guy back door at the net front. Yeah. So does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. It's just like just breaking it down step by step and rehearsing it. And I think that's so important because it's hard to get all those reps in and a lot of them in practice. You can rehearse that daily in your mind and, in a few minutes. And it's just like that, repetition over time. Like then you get to it in game and it's like, oh yeah, this is just what I do. Like this is here and it's become ingrained as a, decision-making model. And it's, you're much more comfortable therefore on the power play because you're that much more prepared. So,
yeah. And I think one thing maybe I forgot there, sorry to cut you off, was I guess I would go back and see myself completing each play successfully and then go right back to the start with getting my feet up to the blue line.
Exactly.
So be feet up to the blue line. I get that pass and it goes right through the seam right away. And then, okay, right back right away. Seam's not, I see myself going all the way through it again. Seam's not there, taking my 2 steps.
Yeah.
moving forward.
Yeah. Do the whole thing every time, right? Do the whole sequence. Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. So no, lots of good, quick little tips there for sure. And reminders. And the other big area I'd like to maybe, just touch on is just like the ups and the downs of the experience. Like you talked about becoming more of a level player throughout, but even like you said, like, playing a lot in the outdoor when you're a kid and that love of the game. And that transition then to as the pressure started to come through minor midget and the draft, and then junior, you had that big year, and then you're hitting, the OHL. How did you find like you navigated those, the ups and the downs, and making sure you still had fun along the way? And, sometimes I know we've all lost sight of the fun part, and it becomes just a job and just like, oh, this is what I do, and you're losing sight of the love of the game. How would you say you navigated that process, those ups and downs, and the journey itself on a bigger level? And you can dive into a few concepts or examples if you want.
Yeah, great. I think like that passion for me was always very deeply ingrained for the game. And there were certainly times where, practices become repetitive, or you don't like the drills in a certain practice, or you're not getting many reps as a fourth year player, not a fourth year, as a fourth line style player. And I battled being in and out of the lineup my first year and a half in Peterborough, trying to find some consistency. And I think the things that really, really helped me, or places that I really enjoyed, were, those last 10 or 15 minutes of open ice in practice, when you're not playing, and sometimes not getting enough practice reps, even that, that what you do with that 10 or 15 minutes can make the difference between you becoming a full-time roster player and not, and working your way out of a lineup even more often. And that free ice for me was an opportunity. It was a time to be with myself and do drills that I wanted and work on things that I wanted to do. It was free time where I could work on me. And I wasn't always the last one out there, but I was always out there working on something. And I mean, even my favorite game was two pass. I still play it as a coach.
Yeah.
So it was trying to rally three guys, and you're playing 2-on-2, two pass in zone with the third goaltender. And you do it till they kick you off the ice.
Yeah, no worries. No, that's a great example of, that persistence and, finding opportunities, looking to continually grow and get better. Like those 10 minutes add up. If you're doing that for years and years and years, like that's the difference, where you're not lighting it up at Acadia, getting offers to go to NHL tryouts, going to play pro, all that good stuff. Like that probably had a huge impact, would be my guess. So there's no way to truly assess that thing. We can make an educated guess there. I'd like to start switching over to the coaching side, but is there anything else in like lessons learned in your path as a player and athlete, and for other young players as they work through those, different levels and try to make the jump and work on their mindset and their game, and be that elite performer that they want to be? How would you, any other final thoughts on that mental side?
Yeah, sure. I got maybe one. I think one thing that I really struggled with early on in my time in Peterborough was social comparison, really. Comparing myself to other players on the fourth line instead of worrying about myself and my improvements. And that added stress unnecessarily, nerves unnecessarily. And then I think it potentially can hurt relationships too. And I had to work through just focusing on what I could control, and working on me getting better as a player, and worrying less about what others are doing and the opportunities that they're receiving. And I think by straightening or narrowing that sort of mindset, or my process of thinking, it enabled me to find more confidence, and also concern myself with things that were in my control. Just helped me feel in control on a daily basis as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a huge one. I know I did a lot of that, and like you're on the fourth line, you're like, oh, like is that guy better than me? And like you almost kind of want him to not do well so you can take his spot. Like that's just so toxic on relationships for yourself, stresses you out. Definitely not a healthy mindset that we want to be cultivating. I'm definitely focused on, like you said, things outside of your control, anyways. And one of the things I always say is like, like learn from other people, get inspired by other people. It does, because you're going to like see others and compare yourself to a degree. The question is how and which way, right?
Yeah.
And so, so that's, and like you said, channel it into like, what can I can control? And so it's such a great lesson, because especially players are not used to that, or especially when you get into a situation you don't like, you're like, why is this guy playing over me? Or like, who's better than me? Or that's just such a thing in our society right now, especially with social media. It's become a norm that we're just comparing all the time, way more than ever before.
Yeah.
And that can really, hold players back in their development, and therefore and just their overall team chemistry and being a good teammate, which are other huge parts to being a great player and working your way up. So I don't know if you want to say anything else to that, but I love that you brought that up.
Yeah. I mean, you nailed it. You've been there yourself. And you labeled the exact feeling for me. I was sitting in the stands as a fourth, fifth line healthy scratch, and thinking, I don't want this guy to do well, but he's your friend, and it's toxic. So that's not, you cannot control if they put you in the lineup or not. That's the management and the coaches options. So don't concern yourself with unwell wishes on others. It's okay. So I can't play tonight, but maybe I'll just go to the gym during the entire game, or focus on myself.
Yeah. And like one of the other like fundamental ways is like, you want good competition. Like you want to be on a team that's, now you're getting all this playing time, but there's no one there to push you, and you're no support and good players to play with. Like you're on a team where you're, not where you want to be. Like that guy does well, great. It motivates you to dig deep. You can learn from them. Like these are inspiring opportunities for you to be a better player. And so it's just flipping how we look at it. And now it becomes more growth. And now you're back to focus on what you can control versus getting caught up on this, who's better, and judging and comparing that way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like you're sitting out, you're watching the game. It's not concerning yourself with players that you want to be out there. It's watching who those top players are on your team or the other team, and what you can learn from them over the course. And if you can learn something from that game and watching from the stands and take it away and incorporate it to your own game, then you're getting ahead of the others.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we'll keep rolling on. We'll move to coaching. If we might get cut out because there's a massive storm here, so and we get cut out, we'll pick it back up. You can hear the hail and there's lightning now. So, but we'll keep rolling along. We get cut out. We'll resume after. So just planting the seed there, just in case. So tell me a bit about more your research at McGill on how best ways to deal with difficult players. And we'll talk a lot about your coaching philosophy. I think it's good for players to hear, and also any coaches listening. Obviously you've been in there. I've done a lot of research in this area too, but it's good to get, some new perspective, especially now being a head coach and at the university level. So I want to tell me about that research first, and then we'll dive more into some of your philosophies and approach.
Sure. I think to start, the premise or where this idea came from was transferring between teams and being on winning teams and less successful ones. The differences wasn't necessarily the skilled or the amount of skilled players on the team. It was generally how the most disruptive players were managed. So I was very curious to see how these sort of elite coaches in the Ontario Hockey League and across the Canadian Hockey League manage the most difficult players to maintain a championship level of culture. I guess to define what a difficult athlete is, your difficult athlete. And these are players that we've all played with across all sports, even in, I think, business and any group setting. It's you've got your social loafers, so guys that are lazy, that think it's cool not to work hard in practice or in the gym. And then you've got your guys who have negative emotions and body language. So the ones that are shrugging their shoulders on a bench or slamming sticks in practice or in a game. And then you've got people that mistreat your teammates. We've all been in group settings with people who are bullies or, they don't treat people right. It's just who they are. And then the last one is defying team norms or rules. So whether that's throwing a guy under the bus or not following curfew, that's a general, just one more on deviance. And that's how we defined our difficult athletes. Speaking with I spoke with 8 Canadian Hockey League coaches who had 10 or more years of experience and had won championships in the past as well. So I really learned a lot about, I guess, these difficult to manage players and how these elite coaches really navigated working with them. And they found, first off, they had to use their entire staff. So that's your trainers, your equipment managers, assistant coaches, and identify who your potentially difficult players are going to be over the course of a season, and trying to learn and get to know that player and all players in general. All these coaches did a really good job at getting to know their players and communicating with them on deeper levels outside of hockey. They wanted to know who these players were as people. So, what's their home situation like? Do they have a girlfriend? How do they do in school? What are their interests in school? And, be engaged in their lives and be a part of them. And they would be excited to speak with all of their players and whatever it is they're doing outside of the rink. I guess one extra piece there too is they tried to avoid labeling players or putting them in buckets. So just because the player is difficult to manage doesn't mean that he's a bad kid or a bad person. And I thought that was really interesting, because it is really, really easy to make a first impression, or even after the course of a few weeks, to say you don't like someone or that they're a bad person. But these coaches always found ways to find something special about each person, and at least can have something to converse about on a general basis. So I really thought that was neat, because I definitely played for some coaches that had labeled guys bad players and would use them as scapegoats, and they'd get the brunt of it. They'd be the ones, a coach would be looking for a specific person to bust up a drill and then blow up on cue on that one person.
Yeah.
So
it's a great that I can identify with that. I can relate. That's very common. Oh, no, that's awesome. Any other kind of big takeaways? So it's like, figuring out who your people are and getting to know them, not labeling them though, especially labeling them as bad, and finding something special about those things to cultivate that. And again, that helps build that connection. Any other big kind of things they did?
They always, they spoke to these players to learn what their perceived role on the team was. So they always provided clear expectations for each player individually, and the role that they expected for them. But they also worked to learn particularly how that athlete perceived their role. So you can give anyone a third line or fourth line duties, but if they think they're going to be a first line goal scorer, they're never going to be happiness, right? Because their expectations don't meet the reality. Yeah. And they tried to bring those expectations and reality to a point where it was clear and concise for each individual athlete. And I really saw that was a navigation process. It's not easy to help an athlete to, buy into some of the lesser roles on the team, and teaching them to understand that those things aren't permanent is important, and that, you're going to find extra ways to keep working with them too. So it's figuring out what more interest they have and how you can teach them. If they want to become a second line player, but they're a fourth line player right now, you can teach them and work with them individually on what that is that you can do with them, in those 10 minutes after a practice, for instance. Yeah. And then there also came points too where, there was always clear consequences, and they never bent the rules, or nothing was, they were never extra lenient on anyone. their expectations or consequences for the group were a standard.
Yeah.
And in that, if you didn't adhere to that standard, then the consequences were clear for you, and you had to seek your punishment. So if you miss curfew, it's automatic. It doesn't matter if you're the best player on the team or you're a healthy scratch normally. You weren't going to play that next game, and we were going to have a group conversation about it. It wasn't, we're mad at you and we dislike you as a person. The actions that you presented yourself were the issue. You're still a good person, but we're all going to learn from this, and it's not going to happen again. So I think for me, learning that's not it's not an area where you need to go just absolutely kick over a garbage can and run around like the guy from Letterkenny in the dressing room and hurricane the garbage can. It's an opportunity. It's a learning opportunity for the group, and it doesn't mean that this person's a bad kid. It just, he made one bad decision, and we all learn from it. He'll sit out one game, he'll be back, and he's not going anywhere. We're not putting him on Lose Island or anything. It's fine. I think overall too, they also manage certain athletes that weren't able to change and were consistently negative in the culture. So their processes weren't perfect. They were able to fix and work with a lot of players and help them have better habits in everyday life, which made them better team players. And ultimately, they also got to areas where they were spending too much time and energy, and it was taking away from the group on this one individual. And at that point, that's when an athlete had to be traded or released as well.
Yeah. No, that's very insightful. So I appreciate you sharing all that. I think it's fantastic. Obviously, that was probably very intriguing and helpful research for you to do, and meaningful work. Was there anything else from those studies and that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure? And then we're going to jump into more your coaching approach and current style.
Yeah, sure. I think just lastly, it seems to never be just a difficult athlete themselves. It's always, they're getting messages from outside of the environment that the coaches couldn't control. So whether that's a parent or an agent or just their own, I guess, personal mindset, they try to reach out and have these people share what the expectation and role was for difficult athletes. So it wasn't just the coach enforcing, here's your role, here's what we expect from you. It was the assistant coaches, the general manager, the team leaders, and they'd speak to agents and parents too and say, this is what his expectation is for the year. If he keeps working, it'll change in the following years, but this is what we need from him now. And if that wasn't, that expectation wasn't able to be met at the end of the day, then that's when they were let go.
Yeah, no, that's very insightful things. I'm not sure how much, obviously a lot of high level coaches, but any coach that's at any level, those are definitely key lessons and interpersonal skills that are so important, particularly about, where we start to label and just, I can't deal with this player. And like, that's not gonna work well. So let's transition and jump into, your current coaching philosophy and the approach and style you bring. Like, I was just on another podcast the other day and did the coaches site. Like, there's lots out there on the interpersonal relationships, the coach athlete relationship. There's a bit of this transition from that old school style to, the new, more players focused coach. How would you describe your philosophy, your approach? I'd be very interested just to learn more. We've had some chats, but it would be great to get it all out there and dive a bit more into just your now style and approach and your key philosophies and values.
Yeah, sure. I guess I think these pillars have to be your foundation for model of thinking and model of doing, and it needs to be consistent, especially for your leaders, but for the entire group, and how you conduct yourself and how you do things. So consistency is a big piece for me personally. It's not one that's on the wall that I talk about with my players, but it's being consistent in my actions and behaviors at all times. And our 4 pillars that I guess embody my coaching philosophy and our team culture are adaptability, accountability, resilience, and relentlessness. So I guess with that, we've got our adaptability. So we're adaptable at all times to changes that are going to happen. So in the midst of a hockey game, that's, you're down 2-1 or 3-1 going into a third period, 5-1. We need to be adaptable and, think back critically and change our systems or structures, or change the way that we're playing. And it's being adaptable when a pandemic hits and we can no longer practice in a rink, or we can no longer be in a classroom as a group. So we're adaptable and we have our team meetings over Zoom, and we don't sweat that sort of small stuff and him and haw at, oh, we don't want to be on Zoom because we're on Zoom for all of our classes. It's ingrained in who we are. We're adaptable people. And then our accountability piece is just being accountable for our actions and behaviors and what we do on a daily basis. So that's, accountable to our body language, accountable to taking a stupid penalty, accountable to, picking your buddy up on the way to the rink at this time so that no one's late. And then we've got our resilience. So that's us overcoming adversity. And I guess in many ways it can be similar to being adaptable, especially in these times, it seems like. But it's being resilient too. Also, when you lose a game and you're looking at outcomes, it's okay, that one's over. We're going to focus on the next one right away. And just rolling with whatever sort of challenges and obstacles we have and moving forward through those. And then we're relentless in our pursuits. And that's academics, athletics, community involvement. We do everything with full effort, and we invest in it fully and completely. We're never half in or half out. It's always done to the best of our abilities.
Yeah, no, those are really well said. And, obviously might be slightly biased, but I think those are fantastic. Yeah. And they line up with a lot of, mental toughness, our mindset, and like, that's the foundation. Right. And then I'm sure you have how you play and what you teach and your styles, but, I love that you brought up, 4 kind of key areas that are really just related to their mindset. Right. And some 4 key kind of components with being adaptable, accountable, resilient, and relentless. I think those are fantastic. And how, what would you say the process for you to identify those? Did you do that with your coaching staff? Did you do that on your own, or those personal ones with the team? I'd be kind of curious to just dive into that as well.
Yeah, sure. They've developed, I wouldn't say, I want to say organically over time, but it's a combination of all of it, really. I've had in previous years, we had coaches meetings, and our big words that came out of those were being adaptable. And that's one that I guess has always stuck with me. And through our coaches meetings, we knew that we wanted to be an adaptable team and a relentless team. And relentless was a previous word relentless and adaptable are 2 previous words from another coach that I worked with. And, those are the pillars of his coaching philosophy. So I've adopted those 2 virtually myself. And then in accountability and resilience, those are ones that I've navigated and kind of worked with more with our players. So at the beginning of each season, I'll sit down with their team leadership group, and we walk through, our words of meaning and how our team identity is going to look and how they want it to look as a leadership group over the course of the season. And with those 2 words, they always wanted to be accountable to each other, have the team be accountable to them, and them be accountable to the team as team leaders, and also that accountability aspect with the coaching staff. And then that resilience piece too is more of a negotiation process with our players. And at this time where I am as a coach, I think I've now adopted all 4 of those as my own consistently over time. I don't think those will ever change as my 4. well, they will, I guess, over time, but in the time being, those are the four sort of pillars that I identify with in my own personal coaching philosophy now.
And so I think that's fantastic, and really well said. And I don't think we need to dive into more like your strategy of coaching, but then maybe just talk the last kind of big area I'd like you to speak to is that old school versus kind of new school. And I would say you're probably more maybe identify with the, get to know your athletes, work with them, understand them, right? Like you're talking about from the research versus like, I'm the boss, I'm going to dictate, and maybe, so touching on that, both on like what your style is and how you would see yourself in that spectrum, as well as like, your experiences from the past too. And obviously it's not like you're, just, not, actually, let me reframe that. It's not being obviously too far on one side where it's just like, oh, just do whatever you want, right? It's like you have to still impose structure, but obviously you don't want to be on the other side too far of the spectrum where it's just pure structure and it's just your way or the highway all the time. And so that's that old school versus new styles, like this nice mix of providing structure, being autonomy, supportive, and working with them. So I overstated myself now, but I think it was important to kind of maybe reframe that. So how would you put yourself in that continuum, your style, and even just your previous experiences with other coaches and how that works in there?
Yeah, great. I mean, I've had both style of coaches, the authoritative, throw the book at you, old school coach, and the new school communicator. And I would definitely put myself more along the continuum towards the new school and new style of coaching. For me, it's communication, and I want to get to know my players. I want them to know that, what I care about first and foremost is their well-being and their understanding of their roles, because like we both said, we've been there before, and it's not fun when you're trying to play a game and you don't know what your role is and no one's talking to you and you're in a corner sitting down in a room on your own. So definitely like communication for me and getting to know my players is a critical aspect. And I think of myself less as a coach and more of a facilitator, I guess. So in that sense, like my role and the way that I frame things with our team leadership group is, I'm here to facilitate things for you guys, and help you guys make this a championship team. And I guess that's where you talked about that autonomy supportive piece in particular. I work with my team leadership group consistently. We meet every 2 weeks at the latest, and we go over our meetings. They're structured in a sense where we're talking about a certain topic, whether it's related to what's going on with our team around us, the world around us, and current events, or it's something I want our guys to work on, like conflict resolution, because they're not getting along as a group. But my goal each season is to facilitate this team leadership group to be strong enough to to manage our team and the small stuff in the dressing room, away from the dressing room, and on the ice in practice, drive the compete level and the passion and everything else going out there on the ice. So I would really say that I like our team to be as self-managed as possible, and I want our players leaving our program feeling the ability, all of them, to be leaders. So over the course of their 4 years with us, they're going to end up in the leadership group at the end. It's not just our formal leaders with A's and C's that are in the leadership group. We've got our nonverbal leaders and our social leaders that are in that group too, that provide key leadership aspects to the team. And if you're in your 4th year, you usually end up in that group, and I want them to take away key life skills from those meetings and from working and trying to manage the team themselves and team events, and take those with them moving forward and creating their cultures after their time with us.
I think that's genius. Well said. Again, I might be biased. I can praise you all day here, but I think, one thing that, like you said, you're the facilitator. I think that word's fantastic because, often the misconception is like the coach is in the middle and the players are there to help the coach. And so, do what the coach says and support the coach. That would be coach centered, right? Whereas it's like athlete centered is like the athletes are there and you're there to support them and facilitate, them to take ownership and go play and create that championship team. So I think, that word just facilitator is just a little switch there that then ties into like, your style of creating a leadership group, working with them effectively, being autonomy sport with them. So I think that's fantastic. And I think, obviously, you're doing a lot and the team's going well. So hopefully when this all ends, you guys will be back out on the ice again soon and gearing up for another season. And I'm quite certain you'll be continuing to rise your ranks with your coaching career. So I definitely appreciate you coming on. To wrap up, any other overarching things to share with either coaches or players or any other life lessons that you've learned along the way that you want to make sure that we haven't touched on that you want to make sure to reinforce?
Yeah, you know what? We covered a lot today.
I did.
I think for me, it's like the big thing is knowing that whatever the circumstances are, they're never as big or as bad as you think they are. So I always try to take a step back as a coach and err not on the side of leniency, but like the side of having a conversation rather than yelling at a kid and making it one way. Like whether something they did was actually bad or their perspective of it is that they didn't think they do anything wrong. You need to sit down and negotiate in conversation with them versus having a one-sided FU match. And I think when you're willing to negotiate with your players and sit down and take the time when they think they're going to get chewed on, it goes a long way. So taking the time to listen is definitely one thing that I would say is, as a coach, is don't point any fingers until you listen.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, that's fantastic. We'll stay in touch for sure. And again, thank you so much for joining. I've got, pages of notes here, good little takeaways. So I definitely appreciate it. Thank you for coming on, Liam.
No, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun, Cassidy.
Thank you.